Hey guys, welcome to the Linux channel, and this is my second video log update of my upcoming new Toffee data center software. I was quite busy from past few days doing in terms of various experiments and as well as doing various performance analysis and benchmarking and things like that, and I was quite curious so that it gets sort of wire speed performance without compromise of any sort of latency issues with some sort of dummy load, because I am in the process of supporting the WAN optimization engines into the same, and I have to completely rewrite these engines, and I can't just borrow my kernel space WAN optimization modules as it is, so because it is user space and it doesn't have this socket data structure, which is the skbuf in the user space so in the user space it just gets like a packet buffer as it is, so in that way I have to completely rewrite these optimization modules. The core objective is in case if it is a 100 Mbps networks, I want the same wire speed performance as much as possible, so that the latency is kept as minimal as possible. And if it is a gigabit network, I want the same gigabit speed without any sort of compromise. So I was really busy in terms of doing various levels of load sharing and doing optimization both in kernel space Toffee data center software modules as well as the user space engines and things like that. So other than that, I was working on Toffee data center the CLI interface. This is the first CLI interface I'm going to support, unlike the Toffee, because the Toffee doesn't need mandatorily any sort of CLI interface. Instead it has the GUI interface. The reason for the GUI interface is it just mimics any typical home or satellite based device, so it needs a GUI interface rather than a CLI interface. You may not find most users accessing these devices via any SSH interface or telnet, and this kind of access is just optional, whereas in a case like Toffee data center, it represents more like a server rather than a networking device. So in that reason, in that case I have to support the CLI interface, so that the IT administrators can quickly do an SSH into the device, and they can control various parameters, and they can also control the Toffee itself through a CLI interface. So CLI is quite mandatory, and I have supported few commands, and I was playing around, and I was also kind of deciding in which way I can support CLI based interface. You can have option based CLI interface, you can have command based CLI interface, and things like that. So I long back experimented option based CLI interface, keeping this in mind, and then suddenly I thought, let me just scrap everything, and then I start a command based CLI interface and make it a kind of stable interface, so that let me standardize the commands, whatever features I support in Toffee data center, and then let me make it a standard CLI interface available for configuring Toffee data center. So let me show you in my desktop. So this is the CLI interface I supported, sudo Toffee. You can access with an administrator privilege. So once you log in, it greets you with this message. It shows the version of Toffee data center, and it shows its release date and its other information like host name and kernel version and things like that. So it pulls the kernel version from uname -r command, and it's going to pull the host name with the hostname command. So it's quite handy, because there are often cases you may, as I discussed in the first introduction video, you may install it in various systems, and you may have some kind of load balancing setup in your data center access. So in that case, what happens is this is quite mandatory, so that it displays this information including the CPA model, and it hints the number of cores available in the same. So this everything is kind of quite handy to identify which system you are accessing in your data center. So once it greets it, any time you can just press question or H or help, and it displays this help message. And these are very few commands which I have supported, and you can get port information with the standard ifconfig command. This does in the background the same ifconfig command, and it pulls out the output of the same. And you can get the same information with the info command, as you can see here. And the info command is quite handy in case if you are logged into the CLI and you need to confirm which server you are accessing. And at any time you can see the prompt it displays. It is going to display the host name as well. So from the prompt you will get an idea that which system you are currently accessing. And other than that, if you see, at any time you can check the health of your server, like it displays the CPU core temperature using the sensors command. So apart from the CPU temperature parameters, it is going to show you the CPU load. As you can see here, it shows the CPU load, the overall CPU load. This is a 6-core CPU, desktop CPU, and it is showing a sort of overall CPU load percentage of the same. So each time you do the health, it is going to pull these parameters dynamically. And so just like a Cisco device, I have supported few commands which looks more or less like a standard Cisco device. So you can use the same standard show config, and it shows the entire configuration of Toffee data center. So the show config command almost mimics the GUI's big picture as well. So in case if you type a show config, it is going to show the entire configuration of the device, just like your Toffee big picture. So I'm not going to make various other variants, like in a standard Cisco device you may have show config all and various other variants, which I'm going to cut short, and I'm going to support what exactly the Toffee data center requires as well. So with the show config you can see its configuration, and in case if you want to set any LAN port and WAN port, you can just do an ifconfig, and you can do LAN port, and you can choose to use this WAN port, you can choose to use this. So just like that you can set its LAN port, WAN port. Only disadvantage in the GUI versus the CLI is you may not get the same sort of intuitive wizard and stuff like that. So once you are well accustomed doing configuration with GUI, and it is very easy to do the same similar steps in the CLI as well. So that's the intent. But on the other side, there are cases it is a lot more easier in CLI, because you can save sort of a user profile and then you can pull the configuration file. So I can just do anytime save config, it saves the config file, and say let me just do a LAN port none show config, and I can just do load config. As you can see here, it just saves it in a standard configuration file in etc folder, and then it pulls that same configuration file. The objective is to keep it as simple as possible. You have these configuration settings stored permanently into a database access. So that's what the GUI does, and even the CLI does the same thing, and it uses more or less, it reuses the APIs of GUI. So in that way there is no rewritten code as much as possible, so that the bugs or any sort of unknown issues are kept minimal. It will use the same library, the user interface library of GUI. So in that way it reuses the same code as much as possible. There are certain parts of code here and there, of course it is freshly written for the Toffee data center CLIs. So it uses the same library, and in that way it pulls the configuration from the database. But whereas if you see the context of load config and save config, what happens is it will store a kind of snapshot in a text-based configuration file in etc folder, and that way what happens is this acts like a user profile. At any time you can use this as a temporary user profile, and then you can just pull it and you can repopulate as well. So that way it is quite handy sometimes. So other than that, you can also see the runtime stats, show stats, and it shows the runtime statistics. Since it is a test development system and it doesn't have yet entire Toffee network setup, it's just cannot be tested at this point of time. So the idea is to the first page of GUI, it shows the stats reports as the overall consolidated stats reports. So that's what exactly being showed over here as well in the text format. So in this way it gives a sort of snapshot. So you don't need to see any sort of trends or historical snapshots of graphs in CLI, whereas in case if you are interested, you can see them in the graphical user interface, and in the CLI you can anyway pull its overall consolidated report like this, and you can have a quick snapshot of what is happening in the system. So at any time, just like the GUI, you can also do stats purge, although you need to maintain a huge amount of caution before doing the same, because it will delete the entire historical stats. In case if you have a device which has stats for more than a year or so, you may end up deleting everything as well. So later I may put some sort of safeguarding option so that it will ask a dual confirmation before proceeding into the same. So you can see here stats purge, and it will purge the stats and it will reset everything, and then with that it will start doing a fresh stats as well. So this is sometimes important if you are doing some benchmarking, if you are doing some sort of testing, in case if you are newly deploying the system into your data center, and in case if you have any test traffic or any experimental traffic, any protocol specific traffic you are going to test, this is needed, and this is the reason it is also supported in the GUI interface of Toffee Data Center. So that's all, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed watching a quick sneak peek of Toffee Data Center software development update, and the current CLI whichever I am in the process of supporting for the same. So down the line, the more features of GUI whichever it exists in the graphical user interface will be pulled in the CLI as well, so that you can have same options available in CLI. But as much as possible, my intent is not like just like that to support these features. It is the objective is to support these features and make it as much intuitive as possible, so that an IT admin can quickly modify the parameters, quickly understand what is configured in the system. Currently it shows very few settings in the GUI as well as the CLI as well, but unlike the Toffee Data Center is going to get sooner or later more and more features and more control options, so that it gives more granular control required for a system admin to fine-tune their servers which has Toffee Data Center deployed in the same. So that's the kind of key asset. So it is going to be implemented or emphasized in GUI as well as in the CLI down the line as well. So that's all, guys, for this episode. I hope you guys liked watching this video. In case if you guys have any feature requests or any suggestions or queries, you can send it in YouTube comments, or else you can directly email to me. So thank you once again for watching this video. Have a nice day. Bye bye.